So before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick intro as to who we are and what we do here at the Fore, just for those of you that don't know us. And hopefully this will bring a good bit of context to the small charity sector and the need that we have for skilled volunteers in this sector. So the Fore is the UK's only venture philanthropy fund, turbocharging the best small charities and social enterprises. But what does this mean and why are we needed? So the UK is facing immense challenges, whether that be inequality, ill health, injustice and the climate crisis. But most of these problems have been solved at local level. Grassroots charities and social enterprises have the answers. There are thousands of innovative leaders with creative solutions to society's most pressing issues working in the grassroots. The problem, however, is the smallest 92% of charities receive just 8% of the funding, and large household name charities sweep up the majority, so very little is left for the small charity sector, meaning they cannot scale their ideas. And this resource deficit is further reflected in volunteer recruitment. So 70% of charities with long-term board vacancies are actually the small and the micro charities. At the Fore, we have a new way. So we find and fund high potential small charities and social enterprises with an income of under £500,000. We offer unrestricted funding of up to 45,000 and it can be spread across 1 to 3 years. We convene visionary philanthropists, including individuals and corporates that have funding and skills to share. And we connect our leaders with the networks that they need to thrive. So this includes skills workshops, impact measurement courses, introductions to other charities, and of course, this pro bono support. And this is where our skilled volunteers come in. So the funding is really vital to our charities, but the training, the skills, and the networks are just as important as the grant in helping our charities thrive. Our charities show incredible income growth over 10 years in comparison to their peers. And it's not just about the money. They tell us that our backing lends credibility and has a domino effect on accessing further funding. Since 2017, we've awarded 665 grants, distributing 13 million to small charities and social enterprises across the UK. And we have shared over 30,000 hours of skill support and matched over 450 volunteers. And our process breaks down many of the barriers to funding that charities often face. And as a result, we fund a high percentage of charities with diverse leadership. So that's all about us and the Fore. Now I'll move on to what exactly skilled volunteering is. So you might have come across the terms pro bono work or corporate volunteering before, but these essentially all mean the same thing. Skilled volunteering is where individuals or employees or professionals basically use their occupational skill set to help a charity or a good cause. And we've really seen that there's been a real shift from traditional volunteering to this kind of skilled volunteering, particularly in a corporate setting where businesses and individuals really want to use their existing skill set to support charities. So, you know, for example, an accounting firm might send their tax advisors to help their local community arts charity with their financial planning rather than getting them to kind of plant some flowers in their garden. So this is really highly impactful and highly needed voluntary work for the sector. But why is this so needed, and specifically why is it so needed for small charities? So as I kind of explained earlier, resources are tight for small charities who often run on a shoestring budget, and large household name charities can afford to pay for kind of external expertise, a bit like a business would pay for external consultants. However, small charities simply can't afford this and largely rely on the voluntary sector to lend these professional skills where they might be lacking within the organisation. And it is often the case with the charities that we back that they've been founded by individuals that have seen or have experience in the issues they're addressing. So this could be youth workers or prison officers or nurses or students. And these individuals might have not gone to business school and they might not have led a team or built an enterprise before. They have the innovative ideas and are excellent at delivery and will anyway often wear all of the hats within an organisation, but having an external volunteer come in with expertise in a certain area can help provide that kind of vital attention and development in higher level operations. And in fact, 80% of our charities have told us that have been matched with a volunteer have told us that the value created from the volunteer was worth the time that they invested. So let's just move on and have a look at some examples. So there will be various skills that you might have gained throughout your career that could benefit small charity. There's some on the screen here as some examples. And I think it's a really good way to start by just kind of reflecting on how these might translate into a small charity setting. If you're unsure, it could even be worth using an AI platform just to ask what your skills could look like in a non-profit voluntary capacity, just to kind of get an idea of how they can be translated. But some examples here, so we have digital and IT. So, could you use your CRM system skills to help a charity set up automated feedback loops to their beneficiaries? Or marketing and comms. So let's say a charity are recruiting for a new comms role. Could you give them some advice on what questions they should ask at an interview, or maybe even just join them in the interview to help them find the right candidate? Research and analysis. So could you use your commercial awareness skills to put together a list of corporates that could be a really good fit for, let's say, a mental health charity to approach for partnerships? Or strategy and business planning we have. So, this could look like sitting down with a charity for a day to think about what their 5-year business plan looks like and what income streams they could explore to achieve this. And these are all real life examples that have taken place with our charities. So if your skills are relevant in a business setting, they can be put to use to create social impact. So obviously related to the title of this webinar, we understand that capacity and time constraints can be a caveat to skill volunteering. And for many of us, whilst the intention is there, we are very busy with our day jobs and personal lives, and finding the time to volunteer alongside this can of course be tricky. And now I don't want to downplay the commitment of a skilled volunteer, particularly that of a trustee, but I can tell you that there are plenty of options with different roles that require different time commitments, and you can use these to your advantage. And it could also be worth checking whether your organisation offers volunteers days, and you can kind of use these to scope the role that you're doing. So, for example, my trusteeship commitments take place during evenings, but I have used a volunteer day this year to shadow a delivery session, and I've used another one to get stuck into some admin work for the charity. So kind of using those volunteer days to go a bit above and beyond what I've been doing in the evenings for the charity. But let's have a look at these different roles there, kind of open them up. So a project volunteer, this might be where a charity is looking to achieve a certain outcomes over a set period of time. And that can depend on how big or small the project is. So this could be, working with a charity over 4 weeks to help refresh their branding or storytelling. Or doing a time-bound project could be really useful if you have more busy and quiet periods of the year. So, you might have a quieter period over summer and you could get stuck into a time-bound project over that period. An advisor, so to a charity, this might be someone that's called upon kind of ad hoc at certain moments to provide expertise on a specific problem or challenge. So, for example, a HR professional could be on hand to provide some quick advice on a charity's grievance procedure that needs a quick turnaround. The mentor or coach might work with the charity founder or another senior leadership team member to guide and support them as they lead a team or organisation. And this, again, can be quite flexible. It could be an hour a month, let's say, over a course of a year or 6 months to help them with leadership, team culture, public speaking, or confidence building. And lastly, the trustee is a person who holds the ultimate legal responsibility for governing and directing a charity. And with this kind of role, trustees will usually have expertise in a specific area relevant to the charity, and commitments are more structured around board meetings and committee groups. So, for example, this could be a quarterly board meeting, including reading papers beforehand, and then you might have separate committee meetings and work at certain areas of the year where you'll use your specific expertise. So you might be a bit busier with the charity as a trustee around the time of setting a budget if you kind of have those financial expertise, or perhaps around the time of doing a safeguarding or policy review if you have more kind of HR background and expertise. As you can see, the time expected amongst these roles can vary significantly, depending not only on the need of the charity, but also what volunteer support they actually have the capacity to manage. And we find what's more typical with a small charity is that you are more involved in the operations. But I see this as a really exciting way to have direct impact on the organisation and its kind of strategy and impact. So there are many different platforms where you can find these roles, so including the Fore, which I'll speak about a bit later. There's other ones like Reach Volunteering or Link Up. But one thing I would say is small charities don't always have the resource to create and advertise these types of volunteer roles. And I would recommend if you come across a charity and you're really interested in their work, just get in touch and share an outline of the expertise you have and any initial suggestions of how you might be able to support their work. And then you could kind of create a role with them from there. So as you start exploring a volunteer opportunity, there are a few things I think is worth keeping in mind to really create the most effective use of your time and theirs. And now these aren't kind of hard and fast rules, but I think these are things that we've seen consistently lead to the most successful volunteer partnerships. And as I said, they'll help you make the most out of your time whilst respecting the charity's capacity and, shape a role that is practical and achievable and just valuable for everyone that's involved. So the first one I've got here is taking the time to understand the organisation. So before your first meeting, I'd recommend spending a little time just getting to know the organisation, their mission, their priorities, and the challenges that they're trying to solve. So, for example, you could have a look at their website or their social media content, or one that we do like to recommend is diving into their accounts on the Charity Commission website. And this gives a good sense of their size, their finances, and their kind of priorities. And I think this will really help you come equipped to the first meeting with curiosity and having some thoughtful questions. And you might even have an initial kind of suggestion on where you can start to add value as a volunteer. The second one I've got here is translate your expertise. And I think this is probably one of the biggest mindset shifts when moving from a corporate environment into a small charity. So, in your day-to-day work, you might be used to specialist terms and large budgets and sophisticated systems. But a small charity may just have a handful of staff, sometimes even one kind of key member of staff wearing multiple hats. So we really, encourage not simply transplanting your corporate best practice, but really looking at adapting it and thinking about what's realistic for the organization's size and resources and their current stage of growth. The next one here is being clear about your capacity. So whether you have an hour a month to offer or a few hours each month, that's absolutely fine. But I think the important thing is to be clear from the outset about what you can realistically commit to. So of course, small charities are very ambitious, and like any organisation, if someone with valuable expertise offers to help, it's only natural that they'll think of all of the ways that you could support them. But you don't have to say yes to everything. I think just being honest about your availability and agreeing a scope that works for the both of you is far better than overcommitting and having to take a step back later. And the last one I have here is being proactive. And now kind of one analogy that came to me when I was writing this is, when you're cooking a big meal for a group of guests and someone comes in the kitchen and asks, what can I do to help? And of course, the offer there is really lovely and so appreciated. But often the most helpful person is the one that comes into the kitchen, looks around, notices what needs doing, whether that being, laying the table or emptying the dishwasher, and just simply gets on with it. And I think it is similar in skilled volunteering. So small charities are incredibly busy. They might not have the time to create, a really detailed project brief, but don't be afraid to ask questions or kind of suggest ideas and shape the work together. I think some of the most successful volunteer relationships begin because this volunteer has spotted an opportunity where they can add value and they've worked with the charity to develop this together. And I think this it also works well if you're not quite sure if you're ready for like a trusteeship role or getting into a real long-term project. Starting with something small and getting to know the charity and how it operates can be really helpful to then work towards kind of another role in an organisation that you're really passionate about. So lastly, the fact that you're all here today means that you probably don't need too much convincing to take up a volunteer role. But if you are still wondering what is in it for me, the truth is, and I think this is something that I've got from a Friends episode, there is no such thing as a selfless good deed. So volunteering is a win for the charity and the volunteer too. It gives you the opportunity to gain new skills or develop existing ones in another setting. So for example, one of our website design experts, she volunteered and learned how to set up web pages that were accessible for people with visual impairments during her volunteer role. You can also build your network professionally. Joining a board is a fantastic way to connect with individuals from other organisations, or you might even just make a few new friends. And similarly, working for a small charity gives you the opportunity to work with people that you might not come across in your organisation. So, the charity sector is filled with ambitious and vibrant professionals from a really diverse set of backgrounds that you can learn a lot from. Lastly, it goes without saying the rewarding feeling of making a difference. Working with a small charity is a fantastic way to see tangible impact from your contribution, an impact that will change the community that you are living and working in. And the last win, where I've got win-win-win, is for your business. So these skills will all be great for your organization's competitive advantage and development. So that's the first part of this webinar. I will now introduce Amy to come and have a quick chat with me to kind of share her experience of doing some advisory work with one of our charities. Let me just stop sharing and get up my notes quickly to introduce her. Hi, Amy. Are you hearing me?
Hello. Yes. Hopefully
Hi.
everyone can hear me well too.
Yes. So Amy, she is a senior member of BlackRock's client business, where she partners with organisations to deliver BlackRock's long-term investment strategies and solutions. Amy's been at BlackRock for nearly 7 years working across a variety of roles, including as chief of staff to the institutional client business, as well as writing client proposals. And throughout Amy's role, she's built expertise in strategy and business development and governance and client partnerships and long-term planning, all things that can be really well, translated to a charity. But of course, alongside her day job, Amy volunteers as an advisor to one of our back charities, Urban Rise. Urban Rise, they equip young people with the financial skills that they need to build secure futures. And Amy's been working with the founder to provide some strategic advice and support as the organisations grow. I'm very grateful to have Amy with us today to talk about your experience, what surprised you, and any advice that you might have for anyone that's looking to use their professional skills in a small charity. But Amy, I think just to kind of set the scene, it'd be great to hear a bit more about what you've been doing with Urban Rise. I think since we matched you, I think it was in February, but yeah, it'd be great to hear a bit more.
Yeah, of course. And maybe I'll start with how I came to connect with them, which I think is probably quite helpful for everybody on the call. Through the Fore, there was a number of different events and access points to learn about the charities that you could partner with. And my first access point was Elspeth. So we had an initial conversation to talk about what I was interested in, passionate about, and one of those key areas was financial education. And so as part of our conversation, Elspeth very kindly sent me a short list of different charities, social enterprises that were looking for certain skill sets, and that gave me an initial inkling into the fact that Urban Rise might be a good fit for me. But alongside that, I also went to some of the Fore's networking events where you get matched with potential charities and learn about all of the different skills they're looking for, and the different charities that the Fore supports. And as part of that, it was actually really helpful to get a bit more of a sense of what are the different skill sets that these enterprises were looking for, because I'd probably had quite a restricted view at the start of what I thought that would be a helpful skill set for the different enterprises. And the thing that surprised me most was just the diversity of the different needs for the organizations, and how there really was a volunteering opportunity for pretty much every single person. So that for me was really helpful to get more of that context on what the sector was looking for, and then how I could potentially help. So for Urban Rise, I sat down with Abdurrahman, who is the founder and an incredible leader of the organisation, and we actually just started with coffee. We didn't really say, "Oh, I'm going to help you with X, Y, Z. Let's kick off this project. Let's start." I think, Elspeth, to your point around surveying the kitchens, we very much surveyed each other's kitchens to figure out kind of what skill sets that I had that were interesting for Abdurrahman, and likewise for me to listen to what was he looking for, like what would be actually additive and helpful to him, because it's a big commitment to onboard a volunteer and to get them up to speed with everything that you're working on. So we spent a lot of time having a very long and enthusiastic coffee. And I think at the end of that, both of us sat and thought, okay, there's something here. We don't actually know exactly what that looks like yet. But from listening to one another and our skill sets, we thought this is a great match. Let's see how we can work together. And so from there, we sat down together and went through Abdurrahman's plans for Urban Rise, and a lot of that was tied into the grant funding that he'd gotten from the Fore. So he had kind of two key priorities. Firstly was, how does he develop deeper corporate partnerships? Being at a fairly large corporate, this is something that I could give probably the other side of the perspective on. And then the second thing was, he's working on a financial literacy tool that he wants to build and roll out, but it was a pretty expansive project, and he was struggling to get enough space to step back, have a look at what he was doing, and prioritize. So the most refreshing thing that I hadn't realized would be a skill set of mine was just the distance that I had from the organization to ask questions and help his thinking. So it's not so much me saying, I'll take this role away from you and you give me that task and I'll run with it, but actually a lot of our interactions are like Abdurrahman using me as a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh perspective, to give a different view, bring in different thinking, and kind of help him with his kind of two core priorities. So I'd say overarchingly my role is to help give space to think. And I think with a lot of the founders that I've met through the Fore, I've really noticed that's one of the most scarce resources that they have available. And with so much passion and excitement about what they're working towards, like having that space and somebody who can just take a step back for them and push, poke, ask questions that just help them to evolve has probably been the most valuable thing, I think, for both of us. Because for him, he tells Elspeth that it's helpful, so hopefully that's good. And then from my perspective, I've learned so much from his energy, enthusiasm, how he thinks about building from kind of small scale to get up to a national level, and his ambitions. So that would be kind of my, in a nutshell, how we met, why we thought it was good, and then what we're working on at the moment.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for the plug in our kind of events. I'll talk about our network later and how you can get invited to those events.
We didn't plan
I totally agree. I think that's where the kind of advisory role works really well, and just being a soundboard for an organization. And that kind of comes back to my point of, charities won't always, post a role on Reach Volunteering and say, I'm looking for a soundboard. But when you've built that relationship, had that initial coffee and learned, surveyed each other's kitchens and learn kind of where you can help, I think that is such a valuable role for a charity. And when they're so head down in their operations day to day, it's hard sometimes just to kind of look out and think about their priorities and what's coming next. So yeah, super valuable. And kind of coming from like a corporate background, you know, your organization has thousands of employees, it's global, and I think Urban Rise is a one-man band. I think he has a bit more support, but
A
essentially it's
little bit
him.
of
So
support, but essentially it's him, yeah.
yeah. How did you kind of feel you adapted or translated your skills in the context of a small charity? And was there anything that kind of surprised you there?
Definitely. I think I initially was a little bit worried that my background would be so focused on I've got all of these people and teams and how do I think about this? But actually the most important part is I think with anything for when I work with my clients, it's all about how do you listen first. And so that to me was the most important thing. There was a lot of synergies between being a one person band and being a big organization. It's just that the approach or way to get something done is very different. And I think that from working in a larger organization, I was able to bring a little bit of that structure and like how do you think
Mm.
about building scale over time and always having that retrospective on okay, we've grown a fair amount over the past few years since I've been at the firm. Looking back, how would I have maybe thought about that differently when we've built out new teams and new businesses that I wish I knew at the start? And I think
Mm.
likewise, I think from Abdirahman's perspective, there's a lot of things that as a small one person band organization, it has opportunity to really shape and be really intentional about. And so I think it was kind of the balance between like you've got so much opportunity from being small and being able to scale, but then it was the balance of having almost for me like hindsight of working in a larger organization and being able to translate that into something that's helpful for someone who's starting to build scale at that time. And so we kind of focus on that and we share quite a lot with each other on our experiences at those different sizes, and often the discussion between the two of us kind of meeting in the middle is really helpful. And I think that the difference in size is actually what makes the partnership between us work quite well, is because we have the different perspectives and are able to bounce ideas off one another. That kind of
Mm.
it gives you that unexpected, oh okay, that like that works well. I think about it similar to friendships when you're like meet a new friend and you think, wow, that's so different to me. Like that's so interesting and so exciting. Like that's how I feel similarly about this partnership. Is it's
Mhm.
the difference is what actually makes it super interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that really speaks to the kind of win-win of these volunteer opportunities and the kind of constant exchange in learning and also just like the impact that you can see so like tangibly and quite quickly from your contribution and it being put into action so quickly as well. I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but it'd be great to hear more about what actual impact you've had on the organization and also what you've personally gained from the experience as well.
Yeah, of course. And maybe I think we'll probably end up coming to this, but in terms of, I'll talk maybe a bit about what we've really done together to get kind of
Yeah.
set the scene. So we essentially spend time semi-regularly, but both Abdurrahman and my schedules are a little bit hectic, so we are quite flexible with one another. But we sit down and we do kind of like spotlight. Let's reflect on what your priorities are and figure out how we can progress. So initially, a lot of it started out with helping him prioritize. So he had so much excitement for a lot of different projects all at the same time and just didn't have enough time to get them all done. So part of that kind of taking a step back was me helping him think, okay, if you can only do two of these by the end of the year, what are the two things that you really, really need to have done? And asking questions to help understand, okay, what is it that's driving that? How are we getting there? And that's kind of what got us into like, okay, corporate partnerships number one, and then getting the financial literacy tool set up number two. And so over time, those priorities have become a little bit clearer, and that's kind of part of the impact that we've had as we've able to progress those things down the line. But then alongside that, there's been more ad hoc, like how do I actually get a financial literacy tool launched?
Mm.
And that came into a number of different ideas. And again, we kind of snowballed out into there's about 10 priorities again. How do we rethink? How do we go back? And so we then spent a lot of time together kind of linking different projects that were going on for the charity. So for example, every year Urban Rise runs a big kind of almost like a launch party. It's a big part of like, how do you gain more awareness, get more people engaged with the charity, you feel like they've got access, and make sure that they're kind of aware of the support that's available through the financial education workshops. But also the financial literacy tool was something that Abdurrahman's really wanting to launch, but they were completely separate things. So a lot of what we've done is start to bring some of these things together. So like, how can you use existing like workshops and also look like big annual events to then use that as a launch pad for new services that you want to be able to offer to the people you're supporting. So a lot of the impact has been more around like shaping thinking rather than, I'd say, like really immediate, like tangible outcomes. And I think it's probably a lot more of a longer term impact that you'll start to see. But for me, that's what I love. Like it's a big part of the value of my job is working with people over a longer period of time. And so from my perspective, that's where I've seen the impact come through. And I think between the both of us, that's where it's been really fun, is you're starting to see the story build out over time. But to your point, it's not something that you just get to know someone over a couple of months and all of a sudden you're like, yes, we've achieved everything. It's very much between the two of us, the commitment was like longer term. Let's think about how we can evolve over a period probably of years. And so it's about starting that journey and seeing where we get to over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, perfect. And this kind of moves on to my next question. You mentioned the kind of having spotlight meetings. It almost sounds like you're doing a bit of a mentorship advisory role in one. How does this kind of work with balance it alongside your day job? Like, do you have any tips for making it work and, when you need that kind of extra flexibility or specific meetings?
Yeah, of course. And I'd say the advice you gave earlier on being honest up front, be really honest up front, don't be overly optimistic.
Yeah.
I had spoken to quite a few different charities kind of over my time with the Fore, and had very honest conversations around capacity. And I suppose you mentioned 9 to 5. Sadly, my role is not quite, I wish it was 9 to 5, but it isn't. And so I had to be quite honest and sometimes a bit sad when I was working with like speaking to charities that I really wanted to support, but I just didn't have the capacity to work with. So I'd say 100% be really honest at the start. And with Abdurrahman, again, I was, and luckily it just worked. So in terms of fitting it around work for me, I sometimes will be able to meet Abdurrahman in the day for like a lunch or a breakfast. So we meet in person because he's around the corner from my office, which is great. And we do kind of brainstorming sessions together. But alongside that, a lot of my thinking time and time commitments is spent using my weekends or kind of later in the evenings. And that's where the kind of advisory relationship works really well. I'd found that actually a lot of the smaller enterprises I'd spoken to wanted like, maybe like 10 days a year of holiday time to come and do like run strategy sessions, or needed someone to do a half day every week. And I just had to be very honest and say that's not something I'm able to commit. But where it's using kind of my free time and a bit of flexibility around that was something that worked really well. And so, yeah, we do kind of flexible spotlight sessions, which works well for Abdurrahman because that's how he operates too. He's also very busy, and likes the flexibility to be able to bring me in and ping me an email and say, Amy, what do you think of this? And I'm like, oh yeah, love that. Or, oh, have you thought about X, Y, Z? But that's kind of how we've built out the partnership. And again, it was just with honesty at the start. It was not trying to overcommit or get so excited about the cause that I forget that I am, I'm not two people, I am one. And so that was something that I think I had to be really conscious of. And through the conversations I'd had with other charities, that really helped me to learn how to set that boundary and be really, really clear. And to your point at the start, you never want a charity to feel overly reliant on you, and you never want to let them down. So I think that was something that worked really well in this instant. And I'd kind of say to anyone thinking about volunteering, be properly honest about what time you have and then use it really well for the time that you do have, because that seems to have a lot more impact than if you overcommit and then the charity ultimately is sat going, oh no, that wasn't what I hoped. and they'll always get you to do a little bit more than you thought anyway, because you'll just get so interested in what you're doing. So I'd also account for that too.
Yeah, when you're clearly so passionate about it, it's quite hard. But I mean, that's a really good top tip. That was one of my last questions was, do you have a top tip for volunteers that are thinking about lending their professional skills for the very first time?
I would say, well, I'll give you two because I already gave one.
Okay.
I'd say be honest up front. I think that's so important, and I think secondly, view it as a partnership. Like it's it's really important that like you know that your skill set matches well with what they're looking for. don't like don't see it as like, oh, I can impart these skills on an organization. Make sure that it's joint, it's collaborative, you're working
Yeah.
together, you spend and invest time up front to learn and understand the organization and like feel really passionate about that, because I think without that emotional ownership and buy-in from both sides, it can be quite hard to get those partnerships to really thrive. So I would say view it as a partnership, not a
Mhm.
task. And I think that kind of, even if it takes a little bit more time than you expected to find the
Mhm.
skilled volunteering opportunity you want, it's well worth it when you find the right one.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Amy, for all of your
Thanks.
wonderful insights there. I've certainly learned a lot myself, so thank you so much.
Very
I
welcome.
will just spend the last few minutes giving some practical ways for you all to get involved, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions if you have any questions for me or Amy as well. So let me just get my screen shared again. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so finding your next volunteer role. There are many amazing skilled volunteer services out there, but just want to highlight why we'd recommend using us and kind of what sets us apart. So through working with the Fore, you will gain access to over 500 small charities and social enterprises that have all been through our due diligence process and identified as having the exceptional leadership, like Amy has experienced, innovative ideas and cost-effective solutions. And volunteering your skills of a charity backed by the Fore gives you the chance to meet the rising stars of the sector and be part of their impact. And this range of choice also gives you the opportunity to be picky and selective in what causes and communities you'd like to support. Over 50% of the charities that were funded in our pilot are now operating nationally, and you could be part of what helps the next one get there. So one way you could get involved is through our pro bono network, and through this network you basically just fill out a short application form just telling us your skills, which my colleague Lucy will kindly share in the chat now, and you will then basically receive monthly updates with opportunities from our portfolio charities that match the skills that you have. So you can kind of scroll through these and choose ones that align with your skills. And if you're interested, you just complete a very short form, expression of interest, sharing a little more about your background in relation to the role. And then we will introduce you to a charity to kind of book in that initial call, that initial kind of coffee that Amy suggested, where you can kind of scope the opportunity, check your skills align from a skills and capacity standpoint before agreeing to take things forward. And we do always emphasize looking for that spark in these initial calls. You know, you should come away feeling really excited to support the organisation. And if you don't, then it might not be the right fit, and that is completely fine. You'll then receive a 6-week feedback form just to check in on how things are going and to let us know if you need any support or have any questions. And then through this network, you'll also receive those invites to our matchmaking events, like Amy mentioned as well. So please do sign up, but this is the first step. The most important thing is keeping an eye out on those monthly emails and taking the time to read through the roles. And then we also have a full list of opportunities on our volunteer directory, which Lucy will also share in the chat now. And this is where you can filter based on sector, location, and the skills needed to find something that you're looking for. And if you do come across something that your colleague or your friend might be excellent for, please do share it to them, you know, get the word out there to support these charities. And similarly, as we mentioned, doing that proactive outreach. So we do have a page on our website that has a portfolio of all of the charities we've backed. Have a look, have a browse, see what gets you excited. And if you want to, connect with any of them to find a role, just get in touch with us and kind of let us know what skills you have. And we're very happy to make introductions if the charities are keen to meet you as well. And that is, yeah, everything from me. What time is it? We have a couple of minutes, but I'm happy to stay on a bit longer for questions. I just want to say a massive thank you for Amy for your contribution to this and all your wonderful insights. I think coming away with, scoping each other's kitchens and being really honest is like the best tips that we've got from your conversation. So thank you, yeah, everyone for coming as well. I'll stop recording now and open the floor for any questions that you might have. You can pop them in the chat, or if you'd like to come on camera, that's fine as well.